I've been living alone for almost 2 years now. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I was engaged once. We were making plans, talking about the future, looking at wedding venues before the world shut down. Then the lockdowns came, and the silence did something to us. It made everything louder, in a weird way, made every crack in the foundation of our relationship echo through the house. We stopped talking about the future. We stopped talking much at all. And slowly, painfully, we both came to realize we didn't really understand each other the way we thought we did. The engagement dissolved into nothing more than a quiet goodbye. She left, and I stayed. The house was small enough to keep up with, and I didn't have it in me to uproot everything. I told myself I'd move eventually, but months turned to seasons, and I'm still here. I've always struggled with anxiety, not the kind people see, no shaking hands or obvious panic, but the kind that makes your mind race when everything is supposed to be still. The kind that replays things you said in passing 5 years ago, making you cringe while brushing your teeth. I obsess over the small stuff. I reread texts a dozen times before I hit send, imagining how they'll be received, then reread them again after they're sent. I second guess things I've already triple guessed. Nights are the worst. That's when the silence stretches too long and my thoughts echo the loudest. I use a box fan for white noise, and without it, I barely sleep. Even with it, rest is fragile. I work remotely now, customer service for a car insurance company. It's about as dull as it sounds. I sit at my desk in an old hoodie with a lukewarm cup of coffee and deal with irritable customers who hate the wait times or the policies or both. Every day feels like a copy-paste of the one before. The same greetings, the same complaints, the same tired script. By the time I log off, I'm mentally drained, but still restless. This happened on a Thursday night in late March last year. The days were still cold, that early spring kind of cold that tricks you into thinking that winter's gone, but it lingers in the corners. I had just gotten off a video call with my therapist. We'd been talking about my insomnia, and she recommended I try melatonin. I picked some up from the pharmacy earlier that week, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I took one pill, read a few pages from the most boring book I could find, some old paperback about productivity hacks, and got into bed around 11 p.m. I remember it was colder than usual, so I grabbed an extra blanket from the hallway closet before settling in. I must have fallen asleep eventually, but it didn't last long. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up with that strange feeling, like something was off. Not fear, exactly, just wrong. The air felt different. I opened my eyes, still groggy, and immediately noticed that the hallway light was on. I never leave that on, ever. I sleep in complete darkness, and my bedroom door was open. I always close it. I started trying to rationalize it. Maybe I got up to use the bathroom and forgot to close it again? Maybe I left the light on by mistake. But then I heard it. Soft footsteps on the carpet. Slow, measured, coming from the hallway. My body locked up. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My breathing grew shallow, like I thought if I could just become small enough, quiet enough, I could disappear into the mattress. I stared at the doorway, and the longer I stared, the more certain I became that someone was there. Then the floorboard near my bed creaked, a specific sound I knew well, and the door opened just a little more. He stepped inside, a man I didn't recognize. Not a mask, not even a hood, just jeans, a dark jacket zipped halfway, gloves on his hands. He looked about mid-30s, thin, short, dark hair. His face was completely neutral. No anger, no panic, no emotion at all. He looked like someone waiting in line at a gas station. Calm, almost bored, and that scared me more than if he'd been shouting. I didn't move. I didn't scream. My mouth felt glued shut. He looked at me for a second, then slowly lifted his hand and pointed toward the hallway. "Go to the bathroom," he said, in the kind of voice someone might use to ask for a napkin. Right now. That was it. No weapon, no yelling, just quiet authority. And I obeyed. I got out of bed slowly, barefoot on the cold floor. I walked past him. He stayed a few feet behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence, but he never touched me. He didn't even speak again until I stepped into the bathroom. "Stay in there for 10 minutes. Don't open the door. Don't talk." I nodded, still silent, and pushed the door just enough that it clicked, but didn't shut all the way. I didn't turn on the light. I sat on the edge of the tub, heart racing so hard I could barely breathe, and stared up at the vent on the ceiling. I started counting to 60, over and over, trying to stay sane. Around the 7th or 8th time, I heard the front door close. Not slammed, just shut. I waited longer than 10 minutes. I don't even know how long, maybe 15, maybe 20. Then I slowly stepped out. I flipped lights on as I moved through the house. Every room looked untouched. My laptop was still on my desk. My wallet was on the table. The TV hadn't been moved. Nothing was missing. Not the cash in the junk drawer. Not the charger on the kitchen counter. Even my phone was still plugged in. Exactly where I left it. It didn't make sense. Even the front door was still locked with the deadbolt. Only the handle had been turned. No forced entry. No broken windows. I called the police. An officer came out, checked the place, took my statement. He suggested maybe I'd left the sliding glass door unlocked. I didn't think I had, but maybe. I felt foolish. I didn't even have a good description. And the strangest part was, the guy didn't take anything. He didn't seem to want anything. He just came in, told me what to do, and left. Like it wasn't even about me. Like I was just in the way. People don't know what to make of that. They want it to be a robbery. They want to explain it with logic. But there's no logic here. He didn't want money. He didn't want my stuff. He didn't want me. And somehow that makes it worse. Because whatever he was looking for, he got it. And I'll never understand what it was. My name's Kayla. I moved in about 6 months ago after finally saving enough to live without a roommate. It felt like a huge milestone, something I'd been working toward for years. I needed the space, both physically and emotionally. Life had been heavy lately. I'd been dealing with some intense anxiety since my mom passed away last year. She had cancer, and for the longest time, I was her main caregiver. Watching someone you love fade like that, it changes something in you. It's not just grief you carry after. It's a strange kind of fear too, like the world could slip out from under you at any second. After she died, I started having panic attacks, nightmares, the kind that wake you up gasping for air, convinced you're falling even though you're lying perfectly still. Living alone was supposed to be a reset, a way to find myself again. And honestly, for the most part, it was. I liked the quiet evenings. I liked the way the house felt like it was breathing with me. Slow, steady. The occasional birds in the morning made it feel normal again, almost peaceful. I picked a neighborhood that felt safe. Families, dog walkers, the kind of place where people actually waved hello. The streetlights worked. There weren't too many for sale signs, and kids rode bikes without their parents trailing behind nervously. It wasn't perfect. I still double-checked the locks every night, sometimes even triple-checked, but I figured that was normal. After everything I'd been through, it felt fair to be a little cautious. That night started normal enough. I'd just gotten off work, heated up some pasta, and parked myself on the couch to binge a new show. I tried not to check my ex's social media, even though my thumb hovered over the app more than once. Just a normal night in. Around 9:30 p.m., I was rinsing my bowl in the sink when I heard it. A knock at the front door. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just 2 or 3 light taps. The kind of knock that says, "I'm not in a hurry." I frowned, drying my hands. Maybe a neighbor? A package? But I hadn't ordered anything. I wasn't expecting anyone either. "Hello?" I called out from the kitchen, loud enough for whoever it was to hear me. A man's voice answered almost immediately. "Delivery for Kayla." I froze. My heart did this weird little skip, landing somewhere in my throat. I didn't like that he knew my name. That detail, him saying my name, made my stomach tighten. "I didn't order anything," I said, keeping a good distance from the door. I didn't move to open it. Something in me knew better. There was a short pause. Then he said, "Are you sure? It says Kayla, Unit 4. His voice wasn't threatening. If anything, he sounded tired, almost confused. But it didn't feel right. It was too quiet outside. No delivery truck idling at the curb. No footsteps crunching on the gravel leading up to the path. When I peeped through the peephole, I saw a man in a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low. He was holding a brown paper bag, but there was no uniform, no reflective vest, no sign that he was a real delivery driver. The bag didn't even look sealed. It was crumpled like it had already been opened. "I'm not opening the door," I said firmly. "Sorry, I didn't order anything. Please leave." He didn't argue. He didn't say anything else. He just walked off, slowly. I kept my eye glued to the peephole, watching him disappear down the sidewalk. No car, no bike. He just drifted around the corner, out of sight. I didn't call the cops. Maybe I should have. A part of me didn't want to blow it out of proportion. Maybe he got the wrong house. Maybe it was nothing. Still, I texted my friend about it, just so someone would know, in case something did happen. After that, I double-checked every lock. The top lock, the bottom lock, the sliding latch. I even dragged a chair in front of the door for good measure. Around 1:15 a.m., I woke up, not from a nightmare exactly, more like I floated to the surface of sleep because something felt wrong. My room was dark, except for the soft glow of the streetlight leaking in through the blinds. I lay there, completely still, listening. That's when I heard it. The door handle, not knocking. The actual handle, jiggling softly, like someone was trying to turn it without making too much noise. At first, the sound barely registered, but once my brain caught up, adrenaline shot through me so fast, I thought my heart would beat out of my chest. I stayed frozen, my ears straining. The handle turned again, a slow, deliberate twist. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to knock anymore. They were trying to get in. The chair wedged under the handle kept it from moving fully. Thank God for small instincts. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called 911. I whispered everything to the operator, barely breathing, trying not to make a sound. She stayed on the line with me, telling me to stay calm, that officers were on their way. The jiggling stopped. For a full minute, there was nothing. Then, footsteps. Soft but definite, moving away from the door. I crept to the front window and peeked through the blinds as quietly as I could. My stomach dropped. It was the same guy. Same hoodie. Only now he had it pulled tight around his face, like he didn't want to be recognized. He just stood there, staring at my door. 2 patrol cars rolled up a few minutes later. Their headlights lit up the whole street like a spotlight. The man didn't run. He didn't even flinch. They found him a few houses down, barefoot, still carrying the same crumpled paper bag. I watched from the window as they cuffed him. He didn't resist, didn't say anything. One of the officers came to talk to me afterward. He said the guy didn't seem violent, just not all there. He gave conflicting answers when they questioned him. First, he said he was delivering food. Then, he said he lived here. Then, he said someone was waiting for him. They suspected he might be mentally ill. They were taking him in for evaluation, maybe a psychiatric hold, depending on what they found. I didn't press charges. I just wanted him gone. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, every lock checked and rechecked. I kept wondering what would have happened if I hadn't put the chair under the door, if I hadn't trusted that gut feeling when he knocked. Living alone was supposed to make me feel safer, stronger, and for the most part, it still does. But that night changed something. I still love my quiet space. I still love the soft mornings and the peaceful evenings. But now, sometimes, I wonder who else is out there, walking barefoot under the streetlights, and if they're looking for a door that isn't locked. I'm writing this in January of 2021, just a little over a year since it happened. And still, every time I replay the events in my mind, I get this deep, sick feeling in my stomach. That kind of gnawing unease you can't shake, no matter how much time passes. My name is Darren. Back then, I lived just outside Syracuse, New York. I was finishing my senior year of college in late 2019, working part-time at a local grocery store to scrape by. It wasn't the most exciting life, but I managed to balance classes, work, and the occasional hangout with my best friend, Mitch. It was in late November, cold enough to see your breath hang in the air, when Mitch texted me a link to this obscure post on an urban exploration forum. It was about a crumbling industrial building on the edge of downtown Syracuse. According to the post, it had once been a textile warehouse, long defunct, abandoned since the late 70s, after going bankrupt. Locals claimed the place had been empty ever since, slowly falling into decay. But what caught our attention wasn't just the urban decay aesthetic. It was the string of strange stories tied to the building. People claimed they'd heard odd noises at night, low scraping sounds, distant banging, things shuffling in the dark. Some chalked it up to rats, or maybe raccoons. Others hinted at squatters. A few more imaginative users suggested something stranger. "There's something in there," one comment read. "Something that doesn't want to be found." Mitch and I had always been fascinated with forgotten places. It wasn't about thrill-seeking, really. It was more like curiosity. What lives were lived in those buildings? What memories did the walls still hold? So we made a plan to check it out that Friday night. Of course, we didn't exactly broadcast it. We knew full well how dumb the idea was. Trespassing, exploring a deteriorating structure, In the dark, it was a recipe for disaster, but we convinced ourselves we'd just take a quick look around and get out. That evening, we parked about a block away from the building, on a lonely side street where the streetlights flickered weakly overhead. The sky was a lifeless shade of gray, and the cold seemed to press in on us from all sides. As we approached, I took in the building for the first time. It loomed over the block, 5 stories of crumbling brick and broken windows. Graffiti covered almost every surface, a chaotic tapestry of tags and forgotten names. The front doors were sealed shut with a thick padlock and a heavy chain. But we found a busted-out window on the side that was just wide enough to crawl through. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew, rust, and years of stillness. Dust swirled in the beams of our flashlights like lazy ghosts. The floor was littered with debris, chunks of plaster, shattered glass, twisted metal. Some rusted machinery sat in silence along the far wall, their purpose long forgotten. We spoke in hushed tones, not out of fear necessarily, but because it just felt wrong to raise our voices, like we were intruding on a space that didn't want to be disturbed. We spent the first 20 minutes slowly wandering the ground floor. There were small office rooms with collapsed ceilings, ancient filing cabinets tipped over, and yellowed papers strewn about like leaves in the wind. I found an old ledger dated 1978, typed records of fabric shipments and receipts. It made the place feel strangely personal. People had once worked here, clocked in every morning, ate lunch in the break room, joked with their coworkers, and then one day, it all just stopped. Eventually, we found a metal staircase tucked away near the back of the building. It groaned under our weight as we made our way up, the sound echoing like a distant warning. On the second floor, we entered what must have once been the main workspace, a massive open area stretched before us, filled with long-abandoned sewing tables, many of them overturned. Torn plastic sheets flapped softly from the rafters above, catching the draft through shattered windows. It was like walking into a snapshot of the past, frozen, decaying, but untouched. Something about it unsettled me, though I couldn't say why. There was a stillness to the air, a pressure that made my skin crawl. Mitch didn't seem to notice. He was already snapping photos with his phone, joking that we could turn this into a Halloween attraction. I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. We found an elevator shaft near the far wall, partially open and missing the elevator itself. Just a gaping hole, a black void leading straight down. Mitch picked up a piece of concrete and dropped it in. We listened. 1, 2, 3, and then a distant clunk. It was deeper than I expected, and something about how long it took unsettled me. We agreed to avoid that section and moved on to the 3rd floor. That's when things started to feel off. Right away, we noticed the footprints in the dust, fresh enough to stand out clearly, winding their way down the hallway ahead of us. They weren't ours. They led toward a corridor that branched off to the right, ending in a closed door. We followed them slowly, shining our flashlights along the ground, careful not to step over them. We weren't scared. Yet. Just on edge. The way you feel when you realize you're not as alone as you thought. Then something strange. The footprints just stopped. Abruptly. No side door. No trail leading away. One moment, they were there. The next, they were gone. Like the person who made them had simply vanished into the wall. Mitch and I exchanged a glance. I could tell he was unsettled too. He pointed down the hallway. Near the door, Something metallic was glinting faintly under the weak light. We crept closer. On the ground was a flashlight, just lying there, like someone had dropped it in a hurry. I crouched down and picked it up. When I flicked the switch, it gave a weak but definite flicker. Still working. I looked at Mitch. He didn't say anything, but his expression said enough. That's when we heard it. A slow, dragging sound from just beyond the closed door at the end of the hallway. Metal on concrete, rhythmic, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. We froze. Without a word, Mitch motioned for me to turn off my flashlight. I did. We stood there in the dark, barely breathing. The only sound, that scraping. Closer now. I leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. The door was slightly ajar. No light spilled out from inside, just an oppressive blackness. I opened my mouth, half considering calling out. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe someone needed help. But something about the sound, slow, steady, methodical, told me not to. Then it stopped, just like that. No more dragging, no more movement, just silence. That silence was louder than the sound itself. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Mitch tugged at my sleeve and gave me a look that said, "We need to leave. Now." And for once, I didn't argue. I wasn't curious anymore. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Mitch tugged at my sleeve and gave me a look that said, "We need to leave. Now." And for once, I didn't argue. I wasn't curious anymore. We backed away slowly at first, then quicker, until we reached the staircase. We all but ran down, slipping on loose debris, hearts pounding like war drums in our chests. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I didn't care. We bolted to the car, jumped in, and locked the doors. Only once we were speeding away down the empty street did I ask Mitch the question that had been burning in my mind. "Did you see anything in that doorway?" He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at me, he just shook his head. We never talked about it again. Never went back. I tried to rationalize it later. Maybe it was just a homeless person, or someone digging through scrap metal. Maybe they dropped the flashlight by accident. Maybe the footprints had just faded out in the dust, and we missed the rest of the trail. But the truth is, I don't believe that. There was something about that building. Something wrong. Something watching. And I don't think it wanted us there. I'm a man in my 40s, currently living a semi-nomadic life with my wife. We don't have children, and because both of our careers require frequent travel, we tend to move every couple of years. Over time, we've gotten used to packing up and starting over in new towns, new neighborhoods, and new apartments. Most of the neighbors we've encountered during these transitions have been friendly, or at the very least, neutral. We'd exchange polite nods, brief conversations, the occasional favor. But there's one neighbor, one man, who stands out for all the wrong reasons. This story is about him. It was February 2020 when we moved into a ground floor apartment in Farmington, New Mexico. The unit was small but cozy, and we were settling in well. A few days after arriving, we were introduced to the couple next door, Olivia and her husband, Humberto. They had 2 young daughters. At first glance, they appeared warm and welcoming. Olivia was especially kind, always quick with a smile. But there was something about Humberto that immediately felt off. I couldn't explain it, but my gut told me he wasn't quite right. He wasn't openly aggressive or inappropriate, just unnerving. Something behind the eyes. Still, we kept things polite. Whenever we passed them, it was all waves and smiles. We never had any deep conversations, and frankly, I preferred it that way. Then March arrived, and with it, the pandemic lockdowns. For most people, it was a challenge adjusting to isolation. For some, it triggered deeper issues. That's when we started to hear shouting coming from the apartment next door. It was always Humberto. His voice would echo through the thin walls at all hours, filled with anger, frustration, and something else I couldn't place. Fear, maybe, or madness. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe he was struggling with the isolation, just like everyone else. Maybe he was under a lot of stress, but the intensity of his outbursts was disturbing. We could hear him through the walls, as if he were standing in our own living room. In April, my wife showed me a text from Olivia. She explained that she and the kids would be staying with her mother for a while, on the other side of the state. She asked if we could keep an eye on their apartment while they were gone. We agreed, partly out of kindness, and partly because, frankly, the idea of a few weeks without Humberto screaming was a relief. They didn't return until October. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last. Humberto's behavior had become even stranger and far more unsettling. Then came one night in early November. It was around 3 a.m. when loud, urgent knocks at our front door jolted us from sleep. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Who the hell knocks at someone's door in the middle of the night? My instincts immediately went on high alert. I got out of bed, opened the closet, and grabbed my handgun. As I moved toward the door, my wife pleaded with me to be careful. Peering through the peephole, I saw Humberto standing there. His eyes looked wild, his expression unreadable. I hesitated, then opened the door halfway. "Humberto," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing here?" "I think you left your wallet by our door," he replied, dead serious. That didn't make any sense. I always left my wallet on the nightstand before bed. It was in the bedroom, right where it belonged. My gut twisted. Something was off. Way off. "You on something right now?" I asked. "No," he said flatly. "I'm not lying. Your wallet was at our door." I didn't believe him, and there was a strange, threatening tone in his voice that set every alarm bell in my head ringing. Slowly, I shifted my stance and let my left hand, which held the gun behind my back, fall to my side, just enough for him to see it. The moment his eyes dropped to the weapon, his demeanor changed. He started backing away, never breaking eye contact. There was hatred in his stare, like he was silently saying, "If you didn't have that gun, you'd be dead." "I don't want any trouble," I told him. "Go back to your apartment, and don't knock on my door again." He turned and walked back to his place, still glaring at me, until he disappeared inside. I locked the door, returned to the bedroom, and put the gun away. "What happened?" my wife asked. "I gave him a warning," I said. She drifted back to sleep eventually, but I couldn't. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, half expecting to hear the vents creak open and find him crawling through. My imagination ran wild that night. Nothing else happened for the rest of the month. We took a business trip in mid-November, which kept us away for nearly 3 weeks. It was a much-needed break. We returned in early December, and not long after, the madness resumed. My wife had just left to run some errands. Not even a minute after she walked out the door, I heard shouting outside. I rushed out to find Humberto yelling at her. She looked terrified. I stormed over. "You yell at her like that again," I said, stepping between them. "And I swear your head's going through a window." He raised his hands like he meant no harm and quietly walked away. When I asked my wife what happened, she told me he just started yelling at her out of nowhere. Later, it occurred to me, I hadn't seen Olivia or the girls since we returned. Had they finally left him for good? Gotten a restraining order? Honestly, it wouldn't have surprised me. It even made us consider moving ourselves. But we decided to stick it out a little longer, just to see if things improved. They didn't. Late January came, and tensions reached a boiling point. It was a Sunday evening. We were watching TV when we heard loud, violent pounding at the door. This time, it wasn't just knocking. He was trying to break the damn thing down. In a matter of seconds, the doorknob snapped and the door flew open. Humberto stood in the doorway, holding a gun. My instincts screamed to run for the bedroom, to grab my own gun. But I couldn't leave my wife. We both raised our hands slowly. He stepped inside, ranting like a madman, accusing us of tormenting him and his family. It was completely baseless, all in his head. Then he hit my wife across the face. I shouted, enraged, but he shoved the gun into my face. "I'm going to kill both of you," he hissed. That's when we heard Olivia's voice yelling his name from outside. It was the first time we'd heard or seen her in months. Her sudden appearance startled him. While his focus was drawn to her, my wife and I bolted past him and ran outside. Olivia was screaming at him, begging him to stop. We ran to a safe distance and called the police. They arrived quickly. Humberto had retreated into his apartment, and now a full-blown standoff was underway. Olivia and her daughters, yes, the girls were there too, stood behind the police cars, shouting for him to surrender. "Please don't shoot him," Olivia cried. "He has serious mental problems." Officers tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't come out. He shattered a window and began shouting again. Then he threw a Molotov cocktail, but the rag fell out mid-air and it didn't ignite. Moments later, he appeared again with another. This time, before he could throw it, officers opened fire, hitting him in the stomach. He still managed to toss the bottle, but it just bounced off a cruiser and fell to the pavement, harmless. The officers stormed in and arrested him. He was taken away in an ambulance. No one else was hurt, thankfully. After giving our initial statements, my wife and I packed some bags and left that night. We stayed in a motel for a few days, then returned to the police station to provide more details about everything that had led up to the incident. Humberto was charged with multiple felonies. We moved out 2 weeks later. We just couldn't live there anymore. The apartment felt poisoned. Too many bad memories. Too much fear. From what I've heard, Humberto is either in prison or a mental institution now. I hated him for what he did to us, for hurting my wife, for invading our home. But deep down, I also pity him. He was clearly battling demons far beyond our understanding. There's more to this story than I've even shared here. The police later discovered that he'd doused himself in gasoline at some point, and his apartment contained multiple homemade explosives. The entire situation could have ended so much worse. In 2023, I decided to sublet a small cabin for a few months after things got tense between my dad and me, and I needed a place to stay. The actual renter of the cabin, let's just call him my landlord, was dealing with some personal issues and had to leave. The cabin was perfect for my temporary situation, as it was a month-to-month rental, so I didn't have to commit long-term. It had 2 floors, a tiny kitchen, a decent-sized living room, and a single bedroom you had to climb a little flight of stairs to get to. There was also this weird, hatch-like door that led to the upstairs bedroom. I had already been there for a month, having paid for the second month's rent by the time the weird stuff started happening. The cabin was at the end of a dirt road with a few other similar-sized homes scattered around. One of the other houses was empty, or at least it seemed that way, because I never saw any cars parked outside or lights on. I didn't know my neighbors well, but I could tell people lived in the other cabins. I worked 12-hour shifts, so most days I'd come home exhausted, make a quick meal, watch TV, and go straight to bed. This one particular night, I came home, made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, grabbed a protein shake, and hit the sack. Now, I always shut the door in the floor at night. Something about having an open entrance to your bedroom just makes me feel exposed and vulnerable, though the door didn't even have a lock. This cabin was clearly built for one person or a couple, so locking it didn't seem necessary. I was watching TV in bed when I heard something. A voice from downstairs. "Who's up there?" It took a second for the words to sink in, and my heart stopped. I sat up quickly, listening. The voice sounded like it came from inside the house, but it could have also been from outside. I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. Crawling to the circular window above the bed, I peered outside, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. I said, "Who's there?" The silence that followed made everything feel even more intense. I was shaken, but I forced myself to get up. I reached for the door handle and opened it, looking down the stairs. I called out my dad's name, thinking maybe he'd come over, but there was no response. I walked downstairs, my mind racing. As I flicked on the light in the living room, I told myself it had to be someone outside, but I wasn't sure anymore. I checked outside, turning on the front light, but there was no one in sight. Confused, I turned off the living room light, climbed back upstairs, and shut the door in the floor again. I tried to settle down and turned the TV back on, but just minutes later, there was a loud pounding on the bedroom door from downstairs. It sounded like someone was angry or trying to scare me. That was the moment I knew someone was inside the house. I stayed completely still, too terrified to move. The scariest part was that there was no lock on the door. Whoever was down there could just open it. For what felt like an eternity, I didn't dare make a sound. Finally, after what seemed like 20 minutes, I mustered the courage to move. I looked around for my phone, but of course, it wasn't on my nightstand. I figured I must have left it downstairs, so I opened the door and glanced down the stairs. The flickering TV light gave me just enough visibility to see part of the living room. Quietly, I crept down the stairs, trying not to make a sound. I didn't turn on any lights. I just ran out the back door barefoot and dashed toward the nearest neighbor's house. I knew someone lived there, and I saw their lights were on. I knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. Then I noticed someone peering at me through the window. It was unsettling how still they were, just staring at me. I yelled through the glass, explaining what had happened, that I needed to use their phone to call the police. But the guy didn't respond, just continued watching me. The longer he stared, the more freaked out I became. I quickly backed away from the door and glanced around the road. No other houses had their lights on. For a moment, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if this guy had something to do with it? I turned back toward the rental cabin, which I found locked just as I left it. I went inside, flipped on every light in the house, and searched for my phone. I found it in my car, sitting in the center console where I'd forgotten it earlier. I went back inside and climbed up to the bedroom. When I opened the door, my blood ran cold. There, sitting on my bed, was a man staring at the TV. I screamed, and he slowly turned his head to look at me. Before I could process what was happening, I bolted back down the stairs, out the door, and straight to my car. I called 911 while sitting in the car, watching the house. As I was on the line, I saw someone walk past the backyard, disappearing into the woods. I told the operator what I saw, and a police car arrived soon after. The officer searched the house, checking the bedroom and every corner. He asked if I had any other places to stay that night, and reluctantly, I decided to go back to my dad's house for the night. The next day, I returned to the cabin to gather my things. Fortunately, the landlord agreed to refund part of my rent, but when he asked me about the man I saw, he quickly dropped the subject after I described him. The whole situation felt off. The creepy neighbor who ignored me, the landlord's strange reaction, and the unsettling feeling that someone had broken into the house. Was it all connected? Or was I just overthinking it? Either way, I was done staying there. Would you have stayed in the cabin after hearing strange voices and finding someone in your bed? Or would you have left immediately, like I did? One quiet evening, Paul was driving along a desolate stretch of highway. The sun had long set, leaving only the dim glow of his headlights to light the way. The road was empty, no cars in sight for miles. Paul was exhausted from a long day, eager to get home, when he noticed a young woman standing on the side of the road. She looked distressed and was waving him down. Feeling a surge of sympathy, Paul slowed his car. The woman approached quickly, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Can you give me a ride?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've been walking for hours. I'm trying to get home, but it's so dark out here." Paul agreed to help her. She told him the name of a nearby town and gave him an address to take her to. As they drove, they exchanged some small talk. She explained that she had been at a party and had missed the last ride home. Despite the eeriness of the quiet road, Paul felt a bit more at ease as they conversed. As they neared the town, she suddenly asked him to pull over. "It's just up ahead," she said, pointing to a small road that led to an old house tucked in the trees. Paul slowed down and stopped the car. The woman thanked him and quickly got out, heading toward the house. Paul looked over at the empty seat beside him and thought to call out, but he hesitated. He had assumed she'd be heading inside, but when he looked up, she was gone. The door had been locked the whole time, so how could she have disappeared so quickly? A chill crept over him. Something didn't feel right. He drove to the address she had given him, only to discover the house was abandoned. The windows were boarded up, the yard overgrown. A newspaper article was taped to the door. The headline read, "Local woman dies in tragic accident near old house." It was the same woman, the one he had just given a ride to. Would you pick up a stranger on a deserted road, or would you keep driving? Claire was a 16-year-old high school student who took up a babysitting job for the Henderson family one Friday evening. They lived in a quiet, secluded neighborhood on the outskirts of town, and the house itself had an eerie, old-fashioned vibe, especially once the sun went down. When Claire arrived, the kids, Emma and Luke, were already asleep, and their parents were heading out for the night. At first, everything seemed calm. Claire made herself comfortable on the couch with a movie and a snack. It was peaceful, just the quiet hum of the TV and the occasional creak of the house settling. But then, around 9:30 p.m., her phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. "Hello?" Claire answered. The only sound on the other end was the slow, deliberate sound of breathing. Claire felt a shiver creep down her spine. "Hello? Who is this?" she asked, but there was no response, just more heavy breathing. Thinking it was just a prank, Claire hung up and tried to brush it off. She went back to watching the TV, trying to ignore the odd feeling creeping over her. But the phone rang again. This time, the same deep, labored breathing filled the line. "Hello?" Claire answered again, a bit more nervously. Still no response. She slammed the phone down, trying to calm herself. But when it rang a third time, her unease deepened. With trembling fingers, Claire answered it. This time, a whispering voice cut through the silence. "Check the children." Her heart skipped a beat. Claire's stomach twisted. The voice was chilling, almost too calm, and those words were impossible to ignore. Panic set in. She wasn't sure what to do. Was this some sick prank? But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Without thinking twice, Claire quickly made her way upstairs, her feet heavy with dread. She opened the door to the kids' room, but to her relief, Emma and Luke were both sound asleep, tucked in their beds. She exhaled, trying to convince herself everything was fine. But as she began to close the door, she heard it. Footsteps. And then, a voice. "I'm the one who's been calling." Her blood ran cold. Claire froze, her back to the doorway. Slowly, she turned around. Standing in the corner of the room, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, dressed in dark clothes, holding a knife in his hand, stood there, his expression blank. The calls hadn't been coming from the phone. He had been inside the house the entire time. Would you stay in a creepy house alone? Or would you leave the moment things felt off?